Amazing. I'm really excited to be talking with the amazing Karundi Williams, the fearless leader in chief at Repower. Thank you so much for making time to join me in this limited edition, series ahead of the most important election of our lifetime as of now.
Yeah.
I know we've been saying that to people, democracy's a line, just want to start there from like, how are you feeling in this moment? Like, there's a lot at stake. There's a lot that we're all holding. I'm just curious, like, just what are you feeling right now? How are you doing? Like,
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. And thank you for inviting me to have this chat with you. I really appreciate that. And for this warm introduction. How am I feeling in this moment? I have complex feelings right now, especially because a woman of color is at the top of the ticket and there is this possibility of a woman of color stepping into the highest level of power and highest office in our nation. And my feelings are complex around that, right? I identify with her. When she became VP, my daughter got a T-shirt that says, "The VP looks like me," right? And there's so much hope and inspiration and excitement and genuine. It's a historic moment, right? And so much of me feel like I get goosebumps when I think about someone in office that I can aspire to dream. Look, we've dreamt about, right? And our ancestors couldn't have imagined this moment, and here she is. And so I'm excited and hopeful, and at the same time, I'm scared. At the same time, I'm really scared for what it means for the other side, scared for her well-being, to be frank and candid about that, terrified that how the country responded, frankly, post-Obama, right? Like what is the response of the other side about that? So it's both hope and fear and the complexities around a woman of color, especially a Black woman, being put in a position to clean up our mess. The mess that we have made, the mess that predecessors before her have made, right? And looking to us to fix it all. And so there's just a lot of complicated feelings that I have around this moment. But with 12 days, is it 12 days today, to go, I am feeling hopeful. And I do believe, and sometimes I get really irritated at our movement because so often we've said, time and time again, this is the election, right? This is the moment. And we go out to voters and we say, our democracy is at stake. But the crazy thing is, it's actually so real, right? This time. And real in a way that I don't know that we've ever imagined it would be real, because the alternative is really reverting back 100 years, 50 years of advances that we've made. And so this moment is really critical because our country, if we go with the alternative, will go all the way back. And we have seen it with Roe, for example. When I think about my daughter, who's 6 years old, just turned 6 last week, it's incredible to me that my daughter will have less rights than I have right now as a woman in this country. And so that is wild to me. And the risk here is the alternative will mean not only does she have less rights as a woman than I do in this moment, it would mean that so much of the successes, our education system, our criminal justice system, we have heard an actual candidate for president in this country say unapologetically that I want to just return to bring whatever, I don't even know what his saying is, make America great again. And when we ask, what does that mean? It's like going back to a time where white people and white supremacy reigned. And so the risk is really, really, really real. And then the last thing I'll say, I went to school for political science at The Ohio State University, Buckeyes for life. Go Bucks. Buckeyes for life. I had to say,
I'm also a Buckeye. I also went to The Ohio State University.
Okay, so you know.
It's in regional planning, so yes.
Thank you. And I studied political science at The Ohio State University, and I couldn't imagine that when I went to school with this, like, oh, I'm just going to go in, I'm going to study political science, and I'm going to lean into the legislative and advocacy side of thing, because I really feel like politics is a path to ensuring that people do better by moving the right policies, right? I couldn't have imagined that we are in a political landscape right now where it is our politic has like literally declined so dramatically from when I went to school. And honestly, when I watch it, I am heartbroken. Yeah. Like, I was the person who was like, oh, democracy, let's fight for this democracy, let's make it better. And now we're actually defending the rights that we currently have. And there's this risk that we will literally dismantle whatever we've known. Authoritarianism. We have a candidate that's talking about Adolf Hitler did some good things. Right? We're talking about January 6th, where it's like, there were some good people. And they had some really important things to say. Like, that's how much our democracy has really deteriorated. And so I am scared. Political violence. We're in a situation right now where we have people running for public office and they're scared for their lives are at risk.
Yep.
I came up in a movement and a time when I was working for elected officials in Ohio, and I never imagined that those same electeds would be fearful for running for office because their lives are literally at stake. So just to see the deterioration in our democracy and to know that in 12 days we get a choice around how do we repair what's been broken and progress forward versus how do we decline every advances we have ever, sort of won and know that our lives are at stake here, right? So, yeah, I'm feeling a lot of things, Anoa. I'm feeling a lot of things.
I appreciate all that. And I did not realize that we were fellow Buckeyes, so that just makes this even more delicious to talk with you. But, like, I agree, right? And I think back to just, being just thinking back, being at Ohio State, right? And in the early aughts, as the kids say these days, and just even the learning around the politic of being Black navigating white spaces, right? And I remember, there's always the PWI versus HBCU wars amongst Black students, but I remember really feeling like some of the advocacy and some of the fights we had as Black students on that campus with a very strong presence with the Hale Center and just other resources really sharpened, I think, a generation of advocacy. And I'm sure other people had similar experiences, whether they went to HBCUs or PWIs, but I really feel like that Buckeye spirit for us, for Black students, really hit a certain way, whether we stayed in Ohio or went elsewhere, and we both went elsewhere. But something else that you said just really like grabbed onto me. We're thinking about like how this politic has really shifted in a very different way, right? Like the rules have always been like skewed. The system's always been stacked against Black folks and other people impacted by these systems. However, there was still always this sense, a scintilla of hope that if we were able to organize, we were able to like get out and vote, we were able to do the thing, we could actually push the change, right?
Absolutely.
This year marks 60 years since Freedom Summer. We literally had Black folks in Mississippi, young students, Black and white in Mississippi, organizing to go register and be able to vote, and then subsequently be able to run their own candidates, right? I stumbled upon this pamphlet from Ida B. Wells from like 1910 about like enfranchisement as a means of deterring lynch, or not deterring, but ending lynching, right? And like that's 114 years ago. And Ida B. Wells, a notable journalist, civil rights, human rights activist, suffragette, like universal voting rights extraordinaire, was advocating for leveraging our political power and our access to the ballot box, leveraging our relationships in a type of co-governance, without using that language, with elected officials that we were putting into office, to move the agenda that was necessary for our people, right? And this is not a new concept, right? Like
exactly.
Black folks have been arguing for this even before we got access to the ballot, right?
Absolutely.
And even when we were denied our access to the ballot, once it was granted, even though it didn't need, but I digress. And we've seen over the last several years, last decade in particular, a resurgence in that particular framework. And
Mm-hmm.
it took me to something else we were talking about like kind of the conundrum we have right now with Black women leadership. And particularly with a Black woman, a Caribbean woman of Caribbean descent, woman of Indian American, Indian descent, who is who has risen to the second highest position in this country, and
Mm-hmm.
potentially, is on the way to being our first non-male president, our first Black woman,
Mm-hmm.
our first Indian
Mm-hmm.
American woman. And there's so much complexity around identity and culture that she has
Mm-hmm.
had to navigate, while also, still recognizing this is still the United States of America. Empire's still going to do what Empire's going to do, no matter who's in charge, at least for
Right.
our generation. So I appreciate what you were describing also about like some of the tension and just being concerned about the pressures that we place on her.
Yeah.
As we're thinking about like what does our leadership models need to shift to and look like, right, to really make sure we're showing up for the communities, our families, ourselves. um
Mm-hmm.
like what does that look like as we're stepping into these roles when we're there's a savior complex, right? Black women save democracy, right? Black women are the vanguard, like all these things that
Yeah.
get put on our back, right? Like, there's the book,
Yeah.
there's the Black feminist book, the bridge called my back, like that gets
Yeah.
levied and dropped at our feet all the time, but we never get the same grace and
Yeah.
understanding. At the
Yeah.
same time, there are things that need to be criticized. Like, how do we balance all this? What is the new leadership we need? And then how do we balance some of these conundrums and complexities built in?
Yeah, no, appreciate you lifting that up. What is sad is that that's the similarity in all our stories as Black women
Mm,
who has stepped into leadership. I can't tell you how many women of color and Black women in particular that has stepped into leadership in this last, I would say, 5 to 8 years, right? We've seen this shift across the movement where so many leaders were called to lead these progressive organizations that were
mm,
predominantly white led and white centered. I was in that situation. Obviously am the executive director of Repower, the first Black woman to lead this organization. But Repower has a history, a 20-year history that was once Wellstone Action, a very Midwestern, white led, white centered organization. But our political climate changed and shifted, and we understood as a movement and as an organization that we needed to evolve to meet the needs of the field. And so as we have evolved and our theory of change has evolved, there was a recognition across the movement, but also here at Repower, that we needed leaders of color and BIPOC leaders to step into positions to help move an agenda forward that centers us. And the sad truth is there were decisions made by the previous, folks that led organizations across the movement.
mm,
And oftentimes we were given organizations that were floundering, the doors were almost closing, and we were saying, here's this opportunity, Black woman, come in and fix it. And not only come in and fix it, but we want you to also be racially competent, and we need you to deal with racism. We want you to deal with the culture internally, because we have a shift with like millennials and different people moving into organizations. We don't even want to go there, but Mo laid it out that our organizations internally have struggles, right? Because we're leading another generation, really, of
mm.
leaders. So there's that pressure to both meet the needs of your staff while strengthening your organizations. And by the way, funders are doing the wait and see thing. Oh, let me see what this person is going to do. Let's be
Yeah.
clear. A lot of us move into organizations that were funded at a high level when there were white leaders. And
Yeah.
then we step into those roles and everybody's like, hold on a second. So you have to deal with funding gaps. You have to be dealing with questions that are asked of you that were never asked of your predecessors, right? And so the expectations are not the same. We have higher expectations and less support, right, in order to meet those expectations. And then more scrutiny on top of that, right? So there's layers to it. And for me and at Repower, in terms of what do we need right now for leaders, I came in 2019. I just celebrated my 5th anniversary leading this organization. I inherited an organization that was about 11 staff with a $3 million budget and a $1 million budget deficit. That was what I inherited in 2019. And then came 2020, we had to all deal with a pandemic on top of that. And now as Repower, 5 years later, we are a $6 million organization organization. So I've doubled the budget. We're in at the end of this year. We're going to be a 22 person staff team. And so I've turned an organization around, completely rebuilt it, and sharpened our North Star, right? So the pivot that Wellstone to Repower made was naming that we are going to center BIPOC people in our work. That was attractive to me, which is what was appealing to me, wanting even to step into this organization. But what we've also done since I've gotten here is to sharpen what does that mean to actually center BIPOC people. And we've sharpened our strategic vision and named very boldly and unapologetically that inside of BIPOC communities is that we have to center women of color. Inside of that, we have to center trans and non-binary and gender expansive people of color, right? And we also have to deal with anti-Blackness. That was really important to me, for me to name that even within progressive spaces that are wrestling with racism and patriarchy and white supremacy, we also have to say yes, and anti-Blackness still lives inside of that. And until we address anti-Blackness inside of that, we're not really getting at the root of the problem, right? So for me, the leadership that is required in this moment, and I would say my leadership is an example, and what we've been able to do at Repower to get to the successes where we are right now. These are some of the things that we've done. One, I lead with an all women of color leadership team, right? All badass women of color who know how to make decisions. When we hold at the core our people and our values, we then make decisions from a place of we are centering these folks and we're fighting for all of us and our collective liberation. I am a mom. When I took this job, my daughter was 9 months old. And by the way, not only do I lead with an all women of color team, they are all mothers to littles, by the way. I stepped into this role. My daughter was 9 months old. She's now 6. And all of the leaders that I lead with are moms. And the reason why that is important is, for me, when Zoya was born, I had a very sharpened, clarified purpose, right? I wanted to work within an organization that was saying, look, for us to get to a liberated multiracial democracy, we have to stand with women of color. We have to stand behind them. We have to build them up. We have to be able to think about a world that's different than what we grew up in, right? So I want a different reality for my kid, right? As a dark-skinned Black woman in my leadership journey, I have faced a lot of, it's been a lot of struggle. And so I want to center my daughter in my decision-making because I want her to have a different lived experience in this country. That's what grounds me, right? And so when we think about our women of color inside Repower, we also understand that inside of our larger movement, there are women of color doing amazing work. You are one of them, right? Like, we have leaders who are running campaigns. We have leaders that work in nonprofits. We have leaders, women of color. And the thing is, our stories, again, are the same. We're putting positions with high expectations with no support. So one of the first things I did was created a woman of color focused training program, right? And that program, not only are we focused on skills and strategy, right? We're also feeding your soul in that space, right? The heart work, the healing justice pieces came in very importantly in that road. So when we think about building our leaders, listen, the fact is, we are burning out in this movement. We have organizers that are leaving the field because they're burning out. So how do we both give folks the skills and the strategy to do their work well? We have to also insert this other part, which is we've got to think about you as a whole being to understand the traumas that what's crazy to me is that we're building organizers in a space right now where their lives are at risk. Think about the mental and emotional trauma that we're asking organizers to continue to show up and deliver. So unless we are addressing the whole person, we're not really getting to it. So for me, what Repower focuses on, besides having a very specific space that are created for women of color, right, to do their work, we are thinking about the whole person. It is, I think about it, the way my team talks about it is strategy, skill, and soul. right? Ensuring that we have all of those things in our training spaces that folks can feel like empowered but also healed, creating space. Like I every time I go to a training, I hear people talk about how they've never been in a place where not only is it BIPOC heavy, they're walking away with like, wow, that was incredible. I've never been in a space where we create space to talk about how we're feeling and how we're healing as a collective, right? So I think the type of leadership we need right now is bold, is unapologetic, it is healed, it is invested in, right? It is having confidence in, right? Because I have been able to move funders to really understand why it's essential to support Repower's work. And I say to them, look, I'm in the people business. We talk about the field, like we talk about like, oh, we're running this issue campaign. Well, who do you think is doing that? It's our people, it's us. So unless you're investing in people, none of it is possible, right? So I'm in the people business, right? And so how do we center that in our work and think about the whole and thinking about how do you continue to come back for what you need, as Repower is an organization that you can get a training if you're new to the movement. You can get your training if you've been in the movement for a long time. So how do you think about it holistically? How do you think about it unapologetically? How do you think about it as people are leaving the movement? So how do we make sure they are where they get the skills and develop them and giving them what they need in order to sustain themselves, to continue the fight, right? Because that it is going to continue, right? And so anyways, I can go on forever, but I really do think why we have been successful at Repower is really being unapologetic about what we're here to do, and to say, listen, if you're going to ask Black women to fix your problems, you actually have to listen to them, and you actually have to have confidence in them, and you actually have to trust them.
Absolutely.
And for example, is not a slogan. I need you to put your money where your mouth is. And that's pretty much what's gotten us to where we are.
I love that. And having been a participant, having been a trainer, both in real life and virtually, and y'all have even nurtured my baby as well. I know we, like I was saying before we start, we mother at different ends of the spectrum. You have a young one. Oh, I miss that age. I have young adults, but my daughter actually, I think during her freshman year at Georgia State, y'all did it in person. I don't remember if it was a deck or a digital. I think it was an in-person digital, maybe. I can't remember which one it was. But several folks, Kimmy, so many people like were really, I think Ari might have been a part of that that leadership cohort still at that time. Were very, very open jam. I mean, some people were like very open and welcoming my child who was, a young Black femme coming of age and trying to figure out herself in terms of tech, creative, where she wanted to be. And then for me too, I love the way y'all approach data and like who is a data person, going back to IWL too, right? Just the reaffirming and the pouring in, because there's so many of these training spaces, because Repower is not just about training, right?
Right, exactly.
Repower is literally about building the genius that is powering our movements. And I love what you said about being in the people business, because it is our people, it is our power, it is our belief that together we will win, that is going to create the lasting change and sustain that change that we actually
Absolutely.
need.
And I would say our spaces create community as well, because we need each other, right? Like when you think about it, we can't do this alone. And if I could, white supremacy really lifts up individualism, right? White supremacy is based on that. And so the antidote for that is community and collective action. So how do we we're building the individual leaders, but we understand at Repower that community is what's essential, because we're going to have to do this together. So that's also a very important piece of the work that we do, is really creating community in our training spaces.
And so my final question, because I appreciate what you just said about the juxtaposition between the focus on individualism and the way in which white supremacy seeps into, our mindscape, right? And detracts for what we need to do. Just thinking about like these dual concepts, 16 years ago, we elected Barack Obama on the hope and change. It was very powerful, but it's like that hope without action and that real like concrete power base, like that hope and that power go really together. So just your final thoughts on like hope and power, hope as a discipline, power as a necessity. How do we harness and encourage and nurture that in our movement spaces in individuals to just sustain us through the long haul.
Yeah. No, I the way I think about hope and what we need right now is we have to start with redefining what a win is. I really think it's
Yep.
important that we redefine it because we've taught our folks in the movement that if we don't win, then we've lost. Power building is a long game, right? And so when you don't win, for example, a policy initiative the first time out, it doesn't, at the end of the day, you've organized a community, you've coalesced a group right around a particular issue. You're building power because you're building community and you're organizing your folks. So how do we think about winning in a different way? Because the winning and moving closer toward what we're imagining our future is winning in itself, right? So I think we really need to start there. And I also think watching our young people these days give me a lot of hope, right? Like I mean, to your point about your daughter being on another spectrum, she is empowered in a way like this next generation
They
is
scare me.
empowered.
They
It is
inspire
scary.
me and they scare me. I'm
I
inspired
and
and scared at the same time.
And I love it because when I
Yeah.
look at when I mean, I won't even say how old I am, but I'm in my mid 40s and I'm like, most of my staff is in their mid 20s and 30s. I am amazed at the brilliance, the confidence, the ability to say, we see something that is wrong and we're going to take the
Mm,
initiative and we're going to move and we're going to organize our group and our crew, right, in our communities and spaces to do something about it. That gives me
mm,
hope, right?
mm,
The fact
mm,
that our young, so I think the young people give me a lot of hope because we're just dealing with a whole nother generation of young folks that I am like, thank you. Thank you to have that confidence that I didn't have when I was your age to be able to see something, name it, and say, you know what, I want to do something about it. So that gives me a lot of hope. I'm hopeful because of the work that Repower does. We really have a very clear vision of the future, which is really a liberated multiracial democracy that all of us can thrive in. And so when I think about thriving, I'm really not thinking about just surviving, which is why I really appreciated where you started with this, with 12 days to go in this election. We have a choice. The choice is clear. We can go back, right? We can revert to what didn't work for any of us, right?
mhm,
Or we can think about how to move forward and correct and tread in the right direction. So right now for me, my kid gives me a lot of hope. These young people who are brilliant, unapologetic, and ask for what they want, they give me a lot of hope. And I think Repower and its work gives me a lot of hope because I see the impact of our work on folks. I see in real time folks stepping into our training spaces and leaving feeling empowered and emboldened and trusting themselves that they can
mhm.
actually take the skills and strategies they've learned to make a change in their community. And so that gives me a lot of hope right now.
I love that. Thank you so much for joining me in this wonderful conversation.
Thank
We
you.
have a week and a half to go. And I am also excited and scared and nervous all at the same time. But I am talking with you and other folks.
That's
Always
wonderful.
reaffirm that we got us always. So I really
We
appreciate
do.
you for joining me.
Thank
Thank
you. Thank you for
you.
having me. Okay, bye bye.